Good afternoon. I am Adriana Díaz, Donoso, also a member of ALAS, and I will be moderating the Education and Creativity panel. In this panel, we want to explore creative approaches that provide opportunities for critical thinking and meaningful educational experiences. We have three wonderful panelists who will lead us in a discussion about ways of creating participatory cultures throughout multimodal literacies, the examination of meaning-making practices in the linguistic landscape of second language learners, and the intersection between creativity and the arts. Our first guest speaker is Dr. Erick Gordon, and the title of his presentation is Literacies for a Participatory Culture. He is the founding director of the Student Press Initiative at Teachers College, Columbia University, and the former director of the New York City Writing Project. He is currently a senior research fellow for innovation at Center for Professional Education at Teachers College, Education of Teachers at Teachers College, and his many projects include eGutenberg, a new project that helps students and teachers explore the potential of e-book authoring software to publish multimedia editions of public domain text. Welcome, Dr. Gordon.
Thank you very much. Feels strange to be mic'd to talk in what feels like an intimate setting. I remember I spoke at an ALICE conference about 8 years ago in Millbank, and I was talking about a project that Student Press Initiative was running for years, where we were working with incarcerated Spanish speakers and using oral history, biographic oral history methods to help them both tell and then interrogate their own narratives and stories. And I remember it very fondly. I enjoyed the experience. So it's great to be back. I want to talk to you about this idea of literacies for a participatory culture, which is really a framework that I've been doing some writing around and theorizing some of the work that has grown out of what has now been close to 20 years of student publishing. So just to, and forgive me, Eric, but I'm probably going to walk around a little bit. To give a little bit of a context, I work in a place called CPET, which is the Center for the Professional Education of Teachers. And I've been there for 14 years now, since its founding. CPET functions in a lot of ways. It's a unique center at the college. It functions as an incubator, really. And what I mean when I say that is that many projects, initiatives, ways of working have grown out of doctoral students' own practices, own research. Many dissertations have grown out of what are very different bodies of work. So many of the centers at the college focus on one thing. CPET is really about innovations in what most people would talk about as professional development, but we very deliberately talk about as professional education. And if we had more time, I would open that up a little bit too. The theme that I want to get at through this, and I've asked someone to shoot me a 5-minute warning, brevity is not my strength. The theme that I want to get at today is creativity in teacher education, but also in the professional education of teachers. Really interested in what are not just the content to engage, but what are the processes? How can we create experiences that engage teachers in creativity in ways that then they bring it to their own classrooms and schools? I want to start with a classroom story to contextualize this a little bit, because I think we are, if I go back, Student Press Initiative, pre-SPI, began in my own classroom where I was a teacher who published students. When we brought it up here, we started looking at it as a site for project-based professional education. What would it mean to bring teachers together to think about how to do PD? They called them staff development in those days, but how to do that work of continuing education through projects, specifically student publication projects. When I started teaching, I had these file cabinets in the back of my room, and those of you who have taught for a while probably know file cabinet is something actual but also a metaphor. These were my guarded files, all of my materials, my lessons, if the school caught on fire, I probably would have collected my files and run out. They were very precious to me. So I stumbled on a couple of Lorca's poems, absolutely fell in love with them. Didn't have a book of Lorca poetry, I had 2 poems. And for probably 3 years I taught these same poems, and I would copy them, photocopy them, and and they started getting lighter each year, the class sets, and believe it or not, there was actually a mimeograph machine in my school back then. And those sat in the files at the back of the room. And then I got this picture, this exact picture of Lorca, and it completely changed the way, it went beyond kind of the idea that author biography helps inform. I got fixed on those eyes, and I started really thinking about Lorca as a man, and started reading what I could about Lorca, but it was that image that drew me in. And then a friend of mine went to Spain, and he came back with a postcard from the 1930s with a post stamp on this, and I realized that that image was actually on a postcard, and I added it to my files in the back of the room. Now I have 4 artifacts in my files. Now if you Google, which is still strange to me as a verb, if you Google Lorca, you get 951,000 hits. Thousands of these beautiful images of this man who is so clearly charismatic, this piercing gaze, these incredible eyes, his romances, him as an artist. He was a kind of amateur surrealist and great friends and possibly lovers with Dali. And
Nel aire conmovido mueve la luna sus brazos y enseña lúbrica y pura sus senos de duro estaño. Huye luna, luna, luna.
How could you ever read a Lorca poem the same way after you heard that luna, right? So now, even what we think of as book is expanding. Now my files, metaphor of the file cabinet, now I have millions of things at my fingertips that expand how I can bring Lorca to my students. Now, at the same time, this little story, there are an estimated 1.2 zettabytes. It's 1.3 trillion gigabytes now stored in cyberspace. Help contextualize that a little bit. It's commonly estimated that the entire Library of Congress contains approximately 10 terabytes of printed material. 1 zettabyte holds about 100 billion times all the material in the Library of Congress. That's just astounding to me with my 2 Lorca poems copied on the mimeograph machine in the back of my classroom. Granted, 99% of this stuff might be kitty cat videos and pornography. Might not be stuff we'd want to bring into our classrooms, but what it means for what we have access to is so changed. And so this idea of student press initiative, which began as the idea of connecting students with the world through their own authorship, has now entered this very new. When I talked 8 years ago, SPI was a very different program. This is something I think we probably all agree, well, I think I will make this statement. Information now as a teacher is overrated. It's easy, it's accessible. I'm interested, I hear my daughters, I have young daughters, and they're always saying, oh, well, just Google it. We're out at dinner, somebody asks me, well, Google it. That instant access, it's still a little strange to me, even though I live with it. I'm interested as a teacher in the ungoogleable. Can I enter that word as the ungoogleable questions? The living inquiry, the idea that not all answers, the answers that come easy are probably not the answers I'm so interested in my students, spending time on. Literacies for a participatory culture. I'll share these slides with you so you don't, I want to run through a couple things because, again, I don't have a lot of time. But highlighting some of the elements as we're kind of theorizing, what does it mean to engage students in a participatory culture where they are both critical consumers and producers of media, that they have growing knowledge of tools and processes. 21st century copyright, it's a massive, massive issue that extends so far beyond legal concerns to me. Making meaning across media and transmedia storytelling. entrepreneurial thinking, curation, remix, all of these things. Remix is the one that's been most interesting to me as far as creative processes. Think of remix as I go into this next piece as combinatorial creativity. What does it mean to see the world as connected and to engage as creative people in making those connections and then representing them as something productive to the world? I want to show you a quick video that will give you a sense of this new program that really, I think of it as part of the trajectory of Student Press Initiative, but from very much an angle of teacher education. To set the stage, we have a fellowship now where we bring in 12 teachers from around the world. Last year we had teachers from 4 different countries. Most of them were from 8 from the States, 4 from different countries, for 3 weeks. 2 of those weeks are in full creative collaboration with New York City high school students. So think of this as this is the learning lab. They are all creative collaborators. We strip their titles, no more student, no more teacher, you're all players, and you have exactly 2 weeks to remix a piece of literature for the stage. So I'm not going to go through the whole film. Essentially, we're thinking of this as a radical experiment, in what does it mean to engage teachers in ways that don't just increase their knowledge base, but an experience that, if you draw from transformative learning theory, that you think of as kind of the unsettling, where they open and build and truly open. Most of them have talked of this experience as transformative, that it has changed their way of seeing the classroom. Our study's now looking at what do they carry to the classroom. That's been another thing, which is a much longer conversation about the constraints of school as we know it. I'm just going to, very quickly, Student Press Initiative, we just published last year our 350th book. I brought some of those here. I'm going to leave them out if people are interested. There are a couple. If somebody really loves one and they want to take them to their students, take it with you. Over 15,000 students published, hundreds of teacher collaborators. One of the things, think of that top one for a minute as a site of teacher education. That expression there. And then for me, I'm always thinking about what are the conditions that I want to build into my own classroom learning experience as a teacher educator. And then you look at that as a model and you think about, well, instead of, leading with rigor, which I think has actually been kind of turned into this kind of crazy and in some situations almost obscene concept, leading with joy and surprise and engagement. Certainly rigor is something I'm after, don't get me wrong there, but what does this say about creating these experiences that change the way people think about creative teaching and themselves, not just as teaching like an artist, and I think this is a key, teaching as an artist. It's a very different approach. Oral history research projects, this is what I talked about in the last conference I came to here. Community neighborhood research projects. Always positioning with levels of expertise. Here's an example. A chemistry region study guide by kids for kids to help the students prepare for this chemistry test. They had to teach others about it. And we published a book that they crafted to teach others. They said that wasn't enough. To help them memorize, they wanted to actually do some recordings.
Talk a little bit about atomic mass by starting with a little bit about its task. What is atomic mass? By definition, weighted average of an element, isotopes.
So we created a recording studio in the classroom. They become, in a way, each one of these becomes a site of creative problem solving. Teachers thinking of curriculum as a site of creative problem solving. What are the skills? What's the content? What are even the habits and community building things we want? How do we infuse those into the structure of a project? I'll skip. And again, I mean, this has all led me to this place of thinking about what is a book in the 21st century? Because, and I, you know, I'm a bibliophile. I love my books, and when I get a book back from the printer that I've made with students, I open it up and I smell the binding, and it's tactile, and I love it. But at the same time, with this kind of the new tools of creative communication, the access, the fact that one of my students might be able to, in 140 characters, communicate with more people than John Keats did in his entire life, that forces us to think about, to really rethink what is a book and what is participation in this way. These are two new programs that we've just started at CPET, again, incubating. We're brewing them up and seeing what comes out of them. Performance at the Center is the one that I just showed you. If we had more time, I'd tell you about Gutenberg, which really is thinking about the publication of public domain texts. I'll end with this. We have a conference coming up in May, and I have flyers that I'm going to put on top of the piano. We've tried to think about how could we almost rethink academic conference. What does it mean? We took proposals from around the country, but our call for proposals said no presentations, and here I am presenting. Only workshops. So you have to engage people in practice. So we have people coming from California, from all around the country to do workshops. We've also kind of played with, we have performing artists, we have teaching artists, we have some actors coming. Should be an interesting, at least, conference. There are flyers over there. To make it more accessible to students, we've created a half-price ticket block for students, if anybody is interested. And I'll say this too, though the organizers would probably strangle me. If anybody's really interested and can't afford the half-price tickets, write me and we will get you registered behind the scenes. The other one, our summer fellowship. Last summer, as you saw in the beginning of the film, we took on Frankenstein. Well, we brought Frankenstein to life in a new way. This summer, we're taking on Kafka. And we're bringing 12 students, high school students, together with 12 teachers from around the world to remix the Metamorphosis for the stage as a multimodal, multimedia experience. After the students leave, again, the teachers unpack. They write, they reflect, and they design original curriculum, customized curriculum to bring back to their own sites. And I think I've exceeded my time. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you so much, Erick Gordon.